Hello there, Year 10. Here we are on week 2 of distance learning, and this is lesson 2 from the topic B7, the carbon cycle. So, books out and time to write our title. How is carbon cycled through our environment? Okay, so let's get that one written down. Don't forget to write the date as well. And look at the carbon cycle and how carbon moves through our environment. We're going to explain how carbon is recycled from a dead leaf into a new leaf. We're also going to look at the water cycle. So how is carbon cycled through our environment? Don't forget to write the date. If you haven't quite got your book sorted and got your title written, then pause now. So here is the carbon cycle. Now you've got two options with this. You could take an image from the internet and put it into your book. You could do a simple recreation of this diagram, but at some way, shape or form, you need to have a picture of the carbon cycle in your book. Now if you go into Google Images, no two pictures of the carbon cycle look the same, so try and get all of the bits in there that I've got here. I'm going to talk through it and we're going to write a 6-mark answer. Okay, so we've got a 6 marker here and then we've got a 1 marker. So we can see at the top there that carbon dioxide is the form that carbon exists in the atmosphere. Photosynthesis is a way of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It's actually the only way that carbon dioxide can be removed from the atmosphere. So your first mark for your 6 marker, okay, hopefully by now you've paused it, you've drawn your carbon cycle out, and now we're working through this 6 marker together. So the first mark of your 6 marker is that photosynthesis is the process that removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and it converts it into glucose. If you remember C6H12O6, it takes that carbon from the carbon dioxide and forms it into glucose. So that's our first mark for our 6 marker. We've got respiration on 3 of these arrows. Remember, all living things respire. So we've got respiration from our plants, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Respiration from our animals and our humans, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And we've got respiration from our microorganisms, bacteria, causing decay, and they are respiring as well, releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Okay, so that's our second mark for our 6-mark answer. Now I know I said before that photosynthesis is the only process that removes the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The only other thing that, if you think back to chemistry, you might not have done the topic yet, but when we look at evolution of the Earth's atmosphere, we find that the atmosphere originally consisted of very, very high concentrations of carbon dioxide. Now the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is only 0.035%, and that's because when the Earth cooled and the oceans formed, all of that water that was in the atmosphere that then became the oceans actually provided a sink for carbon dioxide, and a lot of carbon dioxide dissolved in that water, and that's what originally reduced the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Now, whilst that worked then, we're not going to suddenly get vast quantities of extra water in the oceans, so that's why it's not on the carbon cycle, okay, because that's kind of been and gone, whereas this is cycling that's taking place all the time. So we've only really got photosynthesis that is taking that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And before we kind of went on to plastic being an issue in the oceans, we used to talk a lot about deforestation, which we'll talk about later on in this topic, and we talked about the impact of removing trees, and we went through this kind of whole process of replanting trees to try and reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which has made a massive difference. Okay, there were rules like take away 1 tree, plant 3, that kind of thing. So going back to our 6 marker, we've got the 1 mark from photosynthesis, we've got the 1 mark from respiration. Let's now look at combustion. So burning of fossil fuels and biofuels in power stations is known as combustion, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So that comes from not only factories but cars, vehicles on the road, power stations. Okay, so that's our third mark out of 6. Make sure you're writing this as a 6-mark answer, please. Now we've got carbon stored underneath the ground in the form of fossil fuels, and that's kind of trapped there, stored there until we dig it out, and then the energy from that is going to go into our power stations. Okay, so that's the box at the bottom there. So when it's locked in the ground as a store, it's going to be in the form of hydrocarbons. Okay, we've also got our calcium carbonate rock, okay, which is from decomposed organisms a long time ago, so shells and things like that, so that will be in the ground as a store. But the fossil fuels, when they're released from the ground and then ultimately we combust them, okay, so there's energy stored within them, goes into the power stations, and then combustion takes that carbon into the atmosphere. That supplies our 4th mark. Now on some pictures of the carbon cycle you'll see from plants and animals here, it will say death on the arrow because they're the only arrows that actually aren't labelled, okay? So when plants and animals die, their bodies go into the ground and they decay. And the decay process is actually going to be the next lesson I do this week, and it's a triple science lesson only. So we're looking at decay, which is where our microorganisms such as bacteria break down the dead matter and decompose it, and so they basically break it up into smaller pieces, and because the microorganisms are living things that respire, that's where this respiration came from up here, because that is that they're producing the carbon dioxide which they've kind of fed on the decaying matter, so they've moved that decaying the carbon from the decaying matter to the atmosphere by respiration. Now that takes us up to 5, and we've kind of talked about all of the different arrows now. So as our 6th mark, we're going to say, what impact would deforestation have on the carbon cycle? So have a go at doing that yourself. So deforestation is the removal of all the trees. What impact would that have on the carbon cycle? I think the biggest impact it would have is that the volume of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would just keep increasing, because there's no, if you removed the trees or a lot of trees, there would be less photosynthesis, less removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would start to rise. Now the impact that has is that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So it traps that radiation that then heats up the planet. Okay. So get that in as your last mark of the 6. Now if you need extra time on this particular page, there's quite a lot here. It's going to take you quite a while to create your carbon cycle in your books. You don't need to have drawn any pictures, I should have said that earlier, but you need to create your version of the carbon cycle, answering the 6 marker which we did together there, including that question about deforestation. If you need any extra time, then pause now. Okay, let's look at a couple of exam questions. So the diagram shows the carbon cycle. We've got some lettered arrows. We've got carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We've got animals, plants, dead animals and plants, and fossil fuels. And we've got the word death on here this time. So it kind of looks similar, maybe flipped over version of the one that we've just been using. So let's have a look at what our questions are. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased over the last 100 years. Give 2 human activities that might have caused this increase. Okay, so this is your turn to do. I'm not going to do it for you. Okay, so writing your answers there. Give 2 human activities that might have caused this increase. Give the letters of 2 arrows in the diagram which show respiration. Give the letters of 2 arrows in the diagram which show respiration. Right, let's go back to the picture. Which 2 arrows, give the letters, represent respiration? Okay, let's look at the last question. Give the letter of 1 arrow which shows decay. So let's go back again. Okay, that was a bit trickier, that one, I think. Right, time to green pen. So green pen's out. So the first question was about human activities that cause an increase in carbon dioxide, and we've got burning of fossil fuels, or you could name a fossil fuel like coal, oil or natural gas, combustion, driving cars, you could say, because they've said breathing there, you could say population increase, you could say deforestation, so the cutting down of trees, therefore there's less taking the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. You must say fossil fuel power stations, not just power stations, because nuclear power stations are also power stations and do not release carbon dioxide. And destruction of peat bogs. So peat bogs are areas where it's kind of like boggy, marshy land, and trees have died and they've fallen into that bog and they form this stuff called peat, which is really good for plants, good to be used like a compost. But in doing that, in destroying the peat bogs where they where they are found, to do that they burn it and that releases lots of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We're going to talk about that one again, okay? And then we could have had, for the question, give the letter of 2 arrows which show respiration, we could have had B, C or D, any of those. Okay, so B, this one here, C or D. And then we had the question that said 1 arrow which shows decay. The answer is B. Okay, here. So dead animals and plants, and then they are fed on by the bacteria, which we call decay, and that's B, going into the atmosphere. Okay, another question. This question is about carbon. The graph shows the mass of carbon added to and removed from the atmosphere each year. So we've got the mass of carbon added to the atmosphere and the mass of carbon removed from the atmosphere. Name process X. So the process X is done by plants and animals, and it's all the way over here. It removes carbon from the atmosphere. I said it was by plants and animals. I meant to say plants and algae. I was on autopilot. Okay, done by plants and algae. Okay, so what is the process that's done by plants and algae that removes carbon from the atmosphere? Calculate the mass of carbon added to the atmosphere by respiration per year. Okay, added to the atmosphere by respiration per year. So we've got respiration here, and again here. Now these numbers, I don't know how easy they're going to be for you to see. That top bar is 50. The next bar is 60. And the third bar is 30. Okay, so calculate the mass of carbon added to the atmosphere by respiration per year. Some scientists are concerned that the mass of carbon in the atmosphere is changing. How does the data in the graph support this idea? How does the graph show us that the mass of carbon in the atmosphere is changing each year? Have a good think about this. You might need to do some calculations. Okay, if you need extra time, pause now. Okay, oops, I thought the green pen sign was going to come up. Green pen time. So the process that plants and algae use to remove carbon from the atmosphere is photosynthesis. it's 140 billion tonnes. That was adding together the 50, the 60 and the 30. And there is more carbon being added to the atmosphere than removed. So to work that out, we added up everything that was being added to the atmosphere. We can see that 140 is being taken from the atmosphere, and there is more being added than taken. Okay, get that green pen done. Okay, water cycle. Again, we need to create this in our books, unfortunately, so time to get, just, you don't even need the whole picture, just an idea of those 4 key words, okay? So we have evaporation of water from the ground, from where there is water on the ground, from rivers, from the sea. That condenses and forms the clouds. Precipitation is when that cloud's got so much water in it, it then starts raining, okay, and you probably know more about that from geography. And then collection is where the water lands onto the ground, which is really useful for the plants and the animals because it's fresh water. And then collection is where it then basically drains off the ground. So it goes into the rivers, it drains back into the sea, and we call that collection, okay? Now, as well as creating this picture in our books with all of the key words, we've got 2 questions. What are the benefits of precipitation over land? I think I've just answered that. And what causes evaporation and condensation? So I'll give you a minute and then I'm going to talk through the 2 questions. You might need to pause at some point to get the diagram done in your book. So benefits of precipitation over land is that the crops, the plants, the animals will all get fresh water. Evaporation is caused when particles get more energy. They're able to escape from the body of water, changing state into a gas form. Okay, it's when there's enough energy to overcome those weak intermolecular forces so they can escape. And then condensation is where they lose some of that energy. Intermolecular forces build up again. We've got that change of state back to a liquid. Okay, like I said before, you're likely to need some more space now, some more time, so pause now. Okay, tricky 6 marker. We're nearly at the end. Okay, some of the leaves from a gardener's strawberry plant die. The dead leaves fall off the strawberry plant onto the ground. The carbon in the dead leaves is recycled through the carbon cycle. This is the important bit. Explain how the carbon is recycled into the growth of new leaves. So basically, how has the carbon gone from a dead leaf to a new leaf in the plant? So the dead leaf has died, fallen to the ground and decayed. How has that carbon from that leaf made it back into new leaves? Okay, now this is a 6 marker that I would like you to try. You will need to pause now. Okay, green pen time. So, how does the carbon from a dead leaf get back into a new leaf? So, the dead leaves are broken down, they're decomposed by the microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi for 1 mark. So what does that do? Well, they are respiring organisms. Okay, so I've gone from this point here to this point. They respire, therefore they release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide is now in the atmosphere, and so photosynthesis uses that carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide is used in photosynthesis to produce glucose. So I've kind of gone from here to here, here to here, up to about 4 marks. And then the glucose, we go back to scarf from B4, where we said the uses of glucose in a plant, and some of that glucose is used to make amino acids, which then make proteins and also cellulose. Okay, so don't just say growth. We've got to say, you know, glucose goes into making amino acids, which then build up to make proteins and also cellulose, and they're required for the growth of new leaves. Okay, so we've gone 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks, 4 marks, 5, 6 marks. If you need extra time, pause now. And that's the end of our lesson. Okay, so we got to the end. Quite an interesting one, I think. Carbon cycle, definitely a favourite with the exam board. They really like that one. Longer lesson today, 21 minutes. I hope that was okay for you. And next lesson will be a triple science lesson on decay, so it will only be available for those groups that do triple science. The other groups, you're going to do some educate revision questions. Okay, have a good day, enjoy, and I will see you again for decay, or I will see you after Easter for the rest of B7. If I'm not going to talk to you again, then enjoy Easter. Try and get a bit of a break from everything. If you want to do any revision for any of the paper 1 topics, then feel free to look through the playlists in my YouTube and do some revision there. Hit subscribe, hit share. I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Bye.